Okay. All right. About 10 seconds. Well, good evening and welcome to the Eden Prairie Chamber of Commerce State Representative Candidates Forum. My name is Pat McQuinney. I'm the president of the Eden Prairie Chamber of Commerce. The chamber has nearly 350 area businesses as members, and they employ roughly 35,000 area employees. Tonight's forum is designed to provide the candidates an opportunity to share their views on business questions and issues that have been discussed and created by the Chamber's Public Policy Committee. Our format will allow for 2 minutes for opening comments and 2 minutes for closing comments per candidate. Candidates will have up to 90 seconds to answer questions. We'll use a 20-second warning sign to hold up, and then we'll hold a stop sign when your time is up. I will ask the questions of each candidate, and the questions we'll be asking are focused on a number of key business issues. We do have note cards available for those in the audience. If you have a question you'd like to submit, write that down on the card and hold it up. We do have some volunteers here that will collect those questions and bring them forward. In answering questions, we do ask for the candidates to provide specifics as best they can, including any costs associated with any new or changes to programs, resources needed, or how their answer may differ from their opponents. We'll ask that candidates and any attendees not bring campaign promotions, buttons, or literature into the council chambers, but there is a table outside the doors that we do allow promotional items to be placed on. Candidates, please feel free to have questions repeated if necessary. And of course, please be sure your phone is on silent mode throughout the candidate forum. So let's get started. As you may notice, Alex Faulkner is unable to join us tonight. He is under the weather, so we appreciate him not bringing germs and other things to the forum, but we are disappointed because forums are much better at both candidates here. We did allow for Alex to submit his opening and closing comments to be read, so we will do that, and then we'll get to our questions with Stacy. So Alex's comments are, thank you to the Eden Prairie Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum tonight. I'm very sorry I cannot attend this evening. I'm in the midst of recovering from pneumonia, and out of respect to my opponent and all attendees' health as well as my own, I made the hard decision to stay home. I want to just give a few remarks, as I would have said in my introduction and closing statements, and thank you for allowing this to be read on my behalf. I grew up in Red Wing watching my dad, a serial entrepreneur, start up several small businesses and act as a mentor for others in the community through Red Wing's Chamber of Commerce Small Biz Startup programs. We moved to Red Wing when I was 4 years old. At the time, my dad was a potter and owned Faulkner Stoneware. Within a couple years, he bought the naming rights to Red Wing Stoneware, the historic pottery company that shut its doors in the 60s, and reestablished Red Wing's legacy stoneware company, bringing good-paying manufacturing jobs to town. First operating out of a refurbished horse barn near our home, and then with grants from the city and state, built a new factory just on the outskirts of town. He grew his business working day and night, traveling to trade shows and carrying the very life of the business and livelihoods of his employees on his shoulders. As all businesses have, there were good times and hard times. I remember during the recession in the early 90s, for whatever reason, I was snooping through my dad's desk at home and came upon a stack of his own paychecks that had gone uncashed. I asked him why, and we had discussion about how he needed to take personal hit to afford to pay his employees first, while they all worked to ride out the recession and figure out their business plan going forward. My dad worked day and night to provide for our family, but he also worked day and night to ensure his employees were taken care of. After all, without them, his business wouldn't be anything at all. I learned from an early age what small business mean to a community. They're more than just a place to work, they're a source of community. We hosted holiday parties, summer get-togethers, celebrated their family milestones like weddings and welcoming new children into the world. We stuck together in good times and hard alike to keep the business alive and profitable. I never had the dream to be a business owner, instead went to work in political and issue advocacy campaigns, working to make our communities great places to live. However, the lessons learned from an early age will inform how I will work to support the businesses of our region who provide jobs and a way of life for the residents of Minnetonka and Eden Prairie and area communities. I've had a lot of conversations with local business owners, and while there is a lot of discussion about taxes, the new family sick and safe time leave, sentiments are that Minnesota is a great place to live, work, play, and own a business. CNBC ranks Minnesota as one of the top states for business, and that's with our relatively high rate of taxes. We do a good job using tax dollars to support the people who need help the most. We gave the largest tax cut to working families in a generation last year, and we have accommodated small business concerns such as the costs associated with family sick time. Families want to live here because of the high standard of living, the low unemployment, and the culture of a strong work ethic from small business to the Fortune 500 corporations who have made Minnesota home. Additionally, my work the past 10 years has had me running government relations at both the Minnesota and DC legislatures. I have a relationship with members from both parties, know what it takes to get legislation passed, and perhaps more importantly, know why legislation doesn't pass and the obstacles to overcome. My time working with grassroots, grasstops, business and community leaders and members themselves gives me a jump start in getting work day one. As we look forward, I commit to working with the Chamber and individual businesses to hear and address your concerns. We can work together to ensure businesses, employees, and consumers alike enjoy a fair economy that supports everyone and that continues to make Minnesota the best place to live and work in the nation. I would appreciate your support and vote on November 5th. Again, I'm sorry I cannot be here tonight, but I will endeavor to take any calls or have individual meetings with you to hear directly from you when I'm healthy again, and thank you for your time. So that's Alex's opening remarks and statements. Stacy, you now have 2 minutes with your opening remarks as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Eden Prairie Chamber. My name is Stacy Bettison. I have lived in Eden Prairie for 15 years. I am a single mother of 3 children. I'm an attorney with years of experience in litigation, but currently serve now as a public defender representing clients before the Minnesota Court of Appeals, Minnesota Supreme Court, and Veterans Treatment Court. I'm also a small business owner of a PR firm representing clients with crisis communications issues. In my 25 years of practice, I have encountered all walks, and I have a deep appreciation and understanding of how law and policies affect everyone from factory line workers to C-suite decision makers and middle-class families. After 8 years of our current representation under Lori Pryor's leadership, whose policies I have every expectation my opponent will follow, the question is, are we better off now than we were even just 5 years ago? Are children doing better in school in Minnesota? Our future workers are now 50% of them unable to perform at state standards in reading and math. Minnesota is now ranked 19th in the nation for education. Just 6 years ago, we were 5th. Keep in mind, our district's current rep, Lori Pryor, chaired the House Education Policy Committee. How are middle-class families doing? How is the household budget? The number one concern for families in Minnesota is the economy. Groceries are prohibitively expensive. Inflation continues to rise, and Minnesota is in the top 5 least tax-friendly states in the United States. Businesses, how is our small businesses doing? They are the heart of our economy, and we know that Minnesota has the highest corporate tax rate. I look to you for your support this November, and I welcome the opportunity to work on these issues and others.
Thank you, Stacy. Our first question is on tax and fiscal policy. Businesses in the chamber would like to see Minnesota be more competitive when it comes to taxes. Minnesota's corporate tax rate is 9.8% and is the highest in the nation. In addition, Minnesota's highest individual income tax rate is sixth highest in the nation. Do you support reducing either of these tax rates? Why or why not? And you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Yes, I do. I have been very public in my support of reducing the tax burden on business, on individuals, on state income tax, as well as estate tax, as well as Social Security tax. I favor a cut across all of those areas. I think that with regard to business, we really need to reduce that tax burden and allow businesses to choose how they can use that extra money to reinvest in their business, to reinvest in their employees and training, to invest in research and development, and reducing the tax burden for business, I think, is critical to fostering innovation. When businesses have more money, what we know is that they typically reinvest and make the business a stronger, more innovative business, and likewise, they can invest that in their employees, which I think is very important.
Great. An additional tax and fiscal policy question relates to the Minnesota budget. There was a large increase in spending in 2023, and looking forward, Minnesota may have a budget deficit. If we do face a budget shortfall, what ways would you support balancing the budget? Spending cuts, increasing taxes, or both? And you have 90 seconds for your reply.
Sure. Well, I would not favor increasing taxes. I think we just covered that in the first question, which is I favor a tax cut across all those areas that I've discussed. Yes, we are looking at a possible $1.5 billion deficit in 26 and 27. We expect that that deficit is going to be a difficult one to address. And one of the areas I feel is really important that we lock down on is opportunities to root out fraud, abuse, and misuse of government funds. We need greater oversight over the programs that are now in place to make sure that the money that is coming out of taxpayer dollars or taxpayer pockets is being used responsibly and fairly and honestly, and certainly not criminally, and not in any other way that is dishonest. We have a problem here in Minnesota, and we need to get a handle on that abuse. I think another way we can look at reducing our spending, one of the things that they passed was this refurbishing or this new building for politicians. I would have voted against that. I don't think that that's a good use of taxpayer dollars to put legislators in nicer, brighter offices at this point.
All right, thank you. Moving and looking at labor and management issues, in 2023, the legislature passed a number of bills that impact businesses, including sick and safe time requirements and the Paid Leave Act, which will start in 2026 and increase the payroll tax that businesses and workers may pay. Combined, these mandates require businesses to offer 12 weeks of paid medical leave, 12 weeks of paid family leave, with a cap of 20 weeks total in a 52-week period. If elected, would you support revising these two business mandates and look to provide small business exemptions or any changes to these mandates?
Yes, I would look to revising these mandates. We know that there is not an exception right now to small businesses, and these are going to cripple small business in terms of administration, in terms of finding replacement workers. Small businesses are small by definition, and so finding talent to replace workers that are on extended leave is going to be very challenging. There should be an exemption for small business, period. I think it was a major oversight that the DFL did not consider an exemption or some sort of way for small businesses to deal with this. The administrative burden alone in just managing the leave and the paperwork, the admin time. Small businesses usually don't have an HR department. They sometimes will contract that out. And so this is going to be a huge cost. So I would absolutely like to look at how we can provide leave for people, because it's important that folks have leave. But I know that there's a lot of businesses who already have programs. And by mandating this and putting a one-size-fits-all on businesses is really, it's the epitome of government telling people who are doing a good job already that government can do better.
Thank you. Our next question is another key focus area for businesses is future workforce in our education system. Minnesota test scores are dropping, and we now rank 19th nationally. What policies and efforts would you support to address the decreases in reading proficiency, math proficiency, and other areas of concern? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. It's a great question, and education is a specific focus of mine on this campaign. It's troubling to me, and I know it's troubling to the people whose doors I'm knocking on. They're concerned about our kids. And really, as a business and as a business community, these are our future workers. These are our future business leaders. These are our future decision makers that are going to drive our economy. And these are people that are going to be taking care of us when we're older. And we need these kids to learn the basics. And I think the focus needs to be back to the basics. We know that the legislature has passed numerous mandates, over 65, and a lot of those come with no funding, and that's putting an extreme strain on school districts, superintendents, administrators to figure out how do we do all these mandates. It also is putting stress on teachers, and it's taking away time from getting these kids proficient in these basic subjects. The other thing I just want to say, not only do we care about this from a business perspective, but we care about it because we care about kids. Kids who are competent and self-fulfilled and feel that they can do things are happy and productive members of society. We want children to be happy, and we want them to be healthy. And I think learning and mastering these basic subjects is a part of ensuring children's health long-term.
Thank you. Excuse me. A related topic is the cost and availability of childcare. Chambers across Minnesota hear that childcare costs or lack of adequate childcare is a barrier for workers to enter or stay in the workforce. What solutions do you support to help lower or eliminate these barriers?
So what we know is that Democrats keep increasing unnecessary regulations, making childcare more expensive for every Minnesotan. Now, I'm not here to say that there should be no regulations on childcare. Certainly there should. But the regulations are causing childcare, home daycares, for example, to shutter their doors. We know that over 1,000 home daycares have closed because of regulations. And that, of course, is driving up the cost. We have a scarcity, and basic economics is going to drive up the costs. So we need to address burdensome and unnecessary regulations so that we can bring the cost down and have more providers. That is an important way to get these kids the childcare they need so that people can go and work. Childcare has always been expensive. It was expensive when I had kids in daycare 15, 20 years ago. So we need to address it, and we need to do better as in the United States because we are behind compared to Europe and other countries. But one of the most immediate ways we need to do is an audit of what are these regulations and how are they actually hurting children.
Thank you. Public safety is another area that businesses and citizens have concerns. What are three things you would do to improve safety and provide more confidence for the safety of businesses and residents alike?
Well, this is another passion point of mine. Law enforcement has taken a big hit in recent years, and that movement was really growing starting in 2016. This anti-police rhetoric, and then the defund the police rhetoric, which is in my mind just a very destructive and reckless rhetoric to be putting out there. This has impacted the ability of law enforcement agencies to attract candidates and to retain candidates. And it's also impacted the pension. We need to be looking at the long-term care of our law enforcement, our law enforcement personnel, so that they're taken care of once they have retired. So the one thing that I would do is talk to law enforcement agencies and really the associations, which I've been endorsed by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, as well as the Hennepin County Deputy Sheriff's Association, and talk with them and ask them, what do you need? I was at a violent crime summit this past summer, and one officer who had been attacked with a shotgun got up in front of the group and said, we need help, and we need to be really listening to these people and having conversations about what they need most.
Thank you with that. Our next question is going to be focused on healthcare. Excuse me. Kind of a longer question, so I'll preface. If you need me to repeat it, please feel free to have me do so. Healthcare is a large part of our economy, and businesses want to provide health insurance benefits to employees, and health providers want to provide the best quality healthcare and still have a positive bottom line. Minnesota has typically been recognized as a leader in healthcare, including having one of the lowest uninsured rates in the country, along with a comprehensive Minnesota Care program aimed at ensuring the lowest income citizens in Minnesota. If elected, what do you see are the top issues with healthcare in Minnesota? How would you work to improve them? And how would that impact overall costs to citizens and providers alike?
Thank you. I'm not going to have you repeat the question yet.
Okay, fair enough.
So healthcare is certainly a very complex topic, and I am still in listening and learning mode. But what I understand is that there has been an increased insurance mandates that have increased the costs of healthcare and insurance premiums and placed more burdensome requirements on hospitals around the state, increasing their operating costs and ultimately costing patients more. So that's one thing. And this is an overall trend of more mandates on schools, on hospitals, on childcare providers, on businesses. So it's looking at what are the mandates that are not necessary and are really driving up the cost to provide the quality health care that we want everyone to have access to. I would say that there is a way to increase options and reduce costs through price transparency and expanding the health plan options for Minnesotans and returning more of that balance. I certainly favor continued private options because families and individuals need to have options based on what their health needs are, and they can choose how much of the deductible they're going to pay. We also need to ensure that pharmaceuticals are given their rebate, the meds are given proper rebates, and seeing that through as another way to reduce healthcare costs.
Thank you. Environment and regulations, next topic for us. Minnesota's environmental review and permitting system has been criticized as being difficult and confusing. What changes would you propose or support to make Minnesota more competitive with surrounding states and help businesses get their expansion projects approved sooner?
Thank you. So environmental regulation is, of course, important. One of the hallmarks of Minnesota is how much we cherish our environment and our natural resources. And I, as an environmentalist and an environmental advocate, care deeply about making sure that whatever we're doing is protective of the environment. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is we know that the permitting process is a long one, and it is very much hampering the ability for businesses to take on new projects or expansion projects. And so we need to address that. I think it's very common agreement that the permitting process across the board needs to be reduced, and we need to find a way to make that faster so that projects can move forward for business, so that they can be in the business of doing the business, as opposed to waiting for years for permits. So we need to figure out what is causing those delays and make sure that businesses are a top priority in getting those environmental permits through. Again, we don't want to compromise on how we protect the environment and how we take care of our resources, but we need to do it in a way that is going to allow for business to be moving forward with their innovation and their expansion projects. We know that business expansion projects in Minnesota are down, and so we need to address that.
All right. Energy is our next topic. And again, this is one that businesses and residents share a concern. So energy costs and reliability are a concern for businesses and residents alike. This is a three-part question. So again, if you need me to repeat it, let me know. As we look to shift to more renewable sources of energy in the future, do you support lifting the moratorium on nuclear energy to allow that as an option in the future, is part one. Part two is, do you support new natural gas energy generation in Minnesota? And then please share your views on the issue of prioritizing affordability and reliability versus moving to renewable energy sources. Do you need that one repeated?
The last one I need repeated.
Okay. The last part of the question is, please share your views on the issue of prioritizing affordability and reliability versus moving to renewable energy sources.
Thank you. Number one, yes, lift the moratorium on nuclear. Number two is a yes. I'm losing the question, but it's on natural gas. That is a yes. I feel strongly about that as well. And then three, in terms of prioritizing, we need an all of the above approach with energy. What we in Minnesota, because of our unique climate here, relying on solely renewable energy of solar and wind is it's not a viable option to rely on that solely at this point. I think everyone in this room and elsewhere can agree that clean energy is a priority and we want to get there. But we have to take into consideration the fact that if we went to a clean energy and we somehow were able to meet the mandate of 2040, which we can't, but if we in some magical world could, we would be experiencing brownouts and blackouts. And I'm particularly concerned about that for our most vulnerable populations of low income and the elderly, who are really impacted greatly by a brownout or a blackout situation. We need to be mindful of how that would impact our vulnerable populations. And so I would prefer an all of the above approach. We need to be pursuing clean energy with vigor, but we also need to be realistic.
So I'm going to add a question here for you from our audience. Minnesota has a labor worker shortage. More Minnesotans were working pre-COVID than today. What would you do to attract workers to Minnesota? And why is Minnesota growing slower than the rest of the country? And I know from a perspective, our GDP ranks much lower than even states surrounding us in many cases. So
that's correct. And we also are experiencing quite the migration out of Minnesota. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips right now, but just from 2020 to 2022, we saw a huge increase in migration out of Minnesota with ages 17 to 24. We are losing people. Where are they going? They're going to states with lower tax burdens, and they're going to states with better education. As I mentioned before, we're 19th now in the country, having fallen and done a deep dive from number 5. So how do we attract workers and enable our workforce? We need to, I think, incentivize people to work, which, that would, if we were taxing people less, I think that may be an incentive. And I also think that there is merit to examining how entitlements may be influencing people not to work or be an incentive not to work. So entitlements, when there's too many of them, it's easier to not work than to work. And so that I would think is part of the problem. I need to study that more and would like to look at that more. So I'll just conclude with that.
Great. I'll touch a couple more questions and we'll get to closing here. One is, what do you think are some of wasteful or excessive expenditures, and what do you plan to do to control them or get rid of those wasteful and excessive expenditures?
So I think, again, we have a known problem of fraud. And so if we have created a program in which is being utilized in fraudulent and dishonest ways, that is a place that is an obvious place of too much. We've created too much. And so we need to really identify and create oversight mechanisms that are tracking what is going out the door. That is the first place. The other place I would like to look at cutting is, I mentioned the legislative offices again. That wasn't a small expenditure. That's another place that we can look to. Where are we putting money where it's not really needed, like these offices? There's a lot of opportunities, I feel, to undertake an audit of where these expenditures are. I'm not privy to all of the budget line items and I haven't studied that as a candidate. But I do think that if we sharpen our pencils, we're going to find places to cut back. And I personally have worked on legislation that brought down the expense of running a program out of the BCA in a criminal justice setting, and that was a bipartisan effort that we got passed this last year.
Great. One other question. What is your top most priority, and how do you plan to approach to getting it implemented?
So as I mentioned before, my top priority is really education. I am gravely concerned about our children. And as I said before, not only for their sake and for their health and well-being and their sense of purpose and their sense of agency over their own lives, but if we do not have people growing up who know how to do basic things like reading and writing and having analytical skills, then we are really missing an opportunity to have a flourishing community, have flourishing workers, have flourishing ideas. And so I really feel like education is the most pressing issue in the state, especially since we've seen this precipitous drop of reading and writing and math and science. We have to get a handle on that because these kids are literally our future. And without a promising future, the future is dim. And so I feel like this is something that we really need to figure out. And I think that we do it first by addressing these mandates that are requiring teachers and principals and taking away so much control. Those teachers and principals know how to run their schools. We need to let them have local control and decide how they are going to teach their kids. And then we need to hold parents to account for making sure that those kids are doing what they're expected to do in school.
Thank you. Before we get to the 2-minute closing remarks, final question for you is, voters can only vote for one of you in this coming election. Could you please share why they should select you and why you would be considered a pro-business candidate?
Sure. I think voters should definitely choose me over my opponent. I have worked in an extremely wide variety of industries over the years as both a lawyer and a PR consultant. And in that work, I have worked with so many different people, and I've seen so many different aspects of business and how it actually is run, from everything from the C-suite down to the workers on the line. I have talked with them at all levels and in all industries, frankly: agriculture, industrial, manufacturing, financial services, all kinds of healthcare. And I have a real understanding and appreciation, having done this work for this long, in these variety situations as a lawyer and PR consultant, of really understanding that there's real challenges out there. And when you come at it with a very broad view, you can ask the questions, and you are able to really listen with an open mind. And that's how I've always gone about my work as a lawyer and business owner in PR, is what is troubling you? What is the biggest risk here? And how do we address that? And having done that in all kinds of different industries, I believe that I will bring a very broad perspective and a very learned and thoughtful one.
Thank you. We now are going to go to closing remarks. Reminder, we get 2 minutes for those. And Stacy, you can proceed when you're ready.
Sure, thank you. I am a lifelong swing voter. The environment has always been the single issue I've voted on. And when I could find a fiscal conservative who I knew would be a champion of the environment, they always got my vote. And now I am running as a Republican, and I want voters to know what that means for them. A vote for me means that I will be an independent thinker who is beholden only to the best ideas, whether it comes from a Democrat or whether it comes from a Republican. As a fiscal conservative, I am not anti-government and I'm not anti-tax. I believe that government plays a very important role in our society, and it solves many problems, and that includes meaningful spending. And I want to make sure, however, that taxpayers and voters are getting the best bang for their buck. The best way to sum up the key difference between me and my opponent is this: I believe less government allows for the greatest opportunities for growth, innovation, and accountability. Less government allows and empowers people to exercise autonomy and have full agency over their lives. Less government means people choose how to spend their hard-earned dollars, and this allows for personal accountability. And we know that personal accountability ultimately is the greatest path to empowerment and success. I believe in supporting people who need it. We must support those who are struggling, whether it be mentally, emotionally, financially, physically. It's what makes us a community, and it's what makes being human so gratifying, is the ability to extend a hand and help lift up another. But we must be judicious in how government determines who needs help and for how long. If I earn your vote, my promise to you is that I will vote the priorities of this district, and I'm beholden only to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. That wraps up the first part of our forum. We will adjourn for now the candidates for 49B. We will start that forum in 20 minutes at 6:30. Thank you all for being here. Stacy, thank you.
Thank you.